this lesson, I'm going to break down one of the first things I ever transcribed. It's from a Simon Phillips album, and the song is called the Gooz. And basically, there's some polyrhythmic stuff going on. The main pattern, I've programmed it in here into octave sequencer already. And just to give you an idea of why I created this software, I'm going to show you what this pattern looks like if you write out the whole thing in Logic, for example. Okay, so you can see that's a lot of notes that you've got to input. And in octave sequencer, the same thing is just 12 notes long in this sequencer, 4 notes long in sequencer 2, and 1 note in sequencer 3. And the reason that this works is that each of these sequences is repeating at different lengths. So the first one repeats 12 notes, the second one repeats 4 notes, and the bottom one, step sequencer 3 here, is on a 3-note loop. And they don't resolve for a while. So if I just play this back, I'm going to turn up the resolve point here. So we're going to hear a crash when these resolve. Sounds like this. 2 of the 12 note pattern, sorry. 6 of this pattern here, and 8 of this pattern. So that's what octave sequencer does for you, and it's a good way to break down some of these harder grooves, these things that are built up in layers, basically. The substance of this pattern, we have a bembe that, to begin with, I'm going to play on the ride. So you can see it written out here. So we've got, if we're counting up to 12, we've got the 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you can just, I'm going to mute the other things, and we'll just listen to that pattern and watch it go by. So one of the nice things about octave sequencers, you could turn the tempo down. Let's stick it at 40 beats a minute and play the same thing. It's just a good way to learn this kind of thing. 3, here we go. Underneath that, we have a 4-note hi-hat pattern, which is playing open and then 2 closed on the 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4. So putting that together with the bembe on the ride, we have a bembe playing over 3, because this pattern repeats 3 times for these 12 notes. So the open hi-hat is the pulse. So that's a good starting point to learn what a bembe sounds like over 3. So to make that a bit clearer, I'm just going to put a snare drum in here and get rid of these 2 notes. So we're just listening to this bembe over 3 here. So get familiar with how the bembe feels over 3. We put the hi-hat pattern back in. And then we want to know what the bembe sounds like over 4. So we're going to have the bass drum playing every 3rd note of these 12. And that sounds like this. 2, 3, 4. So once you've got those 2 down, what I would do is switch between them. So I'm going to play against 3 with the snare drum for a few rounds, and then bring the bass drum in, take the snare drum out, and play against 4. then you can play both the 3 and the 4, so you have a 3 against 4 pattern with the bembe on the top. So between the kick and the snare we have. Which we can hear if you want to know what 3 against 4 sounds like. You can program it in to this and just listen to step sequence of 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the kick, and on the snare 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we bring in the bembe. So to play around just learning to hear that, what I might do is play it in octave per sequencer and then gradually fade in and out the snare drum part and the kick drum part, and then you can hear how the bembe changes shape when you're focusing on a different rate underneath it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ga, 1, 2, 3, 4. Bring the snare drum in and start to count the snare drum. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Da 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 da. The 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a. So there you're hearing the bembe. There's a 16th note pattern in 3/4. Bring the bass drum in again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, da. So now you're hearing the bembe as a triplet pattern in 4/4. So that's the basic building blocks of this groove. So once you're comfortable with those, let's put the hi-hat pattern back in, mute the bass drum, and practice the bembe against the hi-hat pattern. And then let's do the hi-hat and the bass drum and get rid of the bembe part. So that would be this. And then finally, all 3 together. So you may notice that that doesn't sound anything like the bit of the track that I played at the beginning of this lesson. That's because the bembe isn't played on the ride cymbal for one, and also we don't play the very first note, so I'm going to take that out. And that led to a lot of confusion when I was transcribing this, and until I actually met Simon Phillips and told him that this was the first thing I'd ever transcribed. I actually had written it down in a different way. I'd written it displaced because I'd heard the 1 of the bembe somewhere else. I didn't realize it was a bembe pattern. So this is what the bembe sounds like when we've removed the first beat. So get familiar with that. And then that pattern is distributed around the toms and the snare drum. And it actually plays twice before the whole thing repeats because the pattern is slightly different on the second time round. So here I've used the top line feature of Octoper-Sequencer. If I click and put sequencer 1 on top line and remove it from drums, now these dots on the top line are going to play a sequence of notes which I've programmed in here. So we've got high floor tom, low mid tom, low mid tom, high floor tom, low tom, blah 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 blah. And that's basically, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes, and what I've programmed into there are 12 notes. And it's the same the second time round, apart from the snare drum at the end. So let me just play you what that part is. You can see if you heard that without a 1, then it's easy to get confused as to where the pulse is. So keep in your head that bembe pattern all the time. So putting it all together, let me take this at a slower tempo again. Let's put it at 70. And I'm going to leave the bass drum out to begin with. In fact, I'll leave the first note in and then I'm going to mute the bass drum, because that's what happens on the record. You get the 1 off the bass drum and perhaps a gong drum, and then he doesn't bring the bass drum back in until a bit later, and that gives it the polyrhythmic feel. So it sounds like this. And then the bass drum comes in now. So let's work on the hi-hat versus the bembe melodic pattern. Drum. And there you have it. That's the complete intro pattern. I recommend getting your own copy of Octoper-Sequencer. You can do a lot more than this with it, but this is just an example of how you can break a pattern down and then, you know, give yourself different ways of hearing it. And if it was a really complicated thing, then I would be tempted to just set a loop going with certain bits that are complicated and difficult perhaps to hear at first, and just leave it playing and get used to the sound of it and start to try and sing the different parts and see how they all interrelate. And once you can sing along with it, it will be easier to play it. It's very difficult to play something if you don't actually know where things are meant to be, if you're just guessing and then getting it wrong. So you need to be comfortable with how this whole thing sounds. So Octoper-Sequencer will let you slow it down and simplify it, take bits out, put bits in. So I think you'll find it a really useful tool.